A second ago, I was still in my rented room in Los Angeles, hunched over my computer, typing code under the glow of the city's neon lights and the hum of traffic. The next second, a biting cold wind slammed into my collar, tearing apart my dull, monotonous life as a wage slave. No dizziness to buffer the transition. No fade in or fade out, just like an invisible giant hand yanked me straight out of the real world and hurled me into a completely unfamiliar, savage wilderness. I am Elias Thorne. An ordinary bottom-tier worker so unremarkable I'd vanish in a crowd. Until this moment, my life had been nothing but overtime, rent, and endless mediocrity. I never imagined fate would flip the script in such an absurd way. Beneath my feet was soft, damp black-brown soil, mixed with the stench of rotting leaves and the musky scent of some unknown beast, pungent and overpowering. Looking up, towering ancient trees blotted out the sky, their trunks so thick it would take several people to wrap their arms around them, vines twisted and tangled, covered in strange, glowing fluorescent moss I'd never seen before. Faint, fleeting shadows darted through the dim forest, and the air was thick with danger. The sky above wasn't the familiar blue I knew. Instead, it was a murky, dark purple, with heavy, oppressive clouds that carried an eerie, mysterious aura utterly alien to Earth. I barely had time to process the absurdity of being transported to another world before the threat of death was already pressing against my throat. A low, hoarse, beastly roar exploded from the bushes on my left. Shaking leaves loose from the trees, I whipped my head around, every muscle in my body tensing instantly, my pupils contracting sharply. 3 massive monsters, far larger than any wolf on Earth, had locked onto me. Slowly stepping out from the underbrush, their bodies were covered in hard, gray-black armor, with grotesque bone scales bulging beneath their fur. Their eyes were a boiling blood red, fangs protruding, dripping thick, disgusting saliva. Their limbs pounded the ground with a dull, rhythmic thud, each step radiating a bloodthirsty killing intent. They were otherworldly beasts, storm direwolves. The name popped into my mind out of nowhere, as if the instinctive knowledge of this world's creatures had been forcibly injected into my consciousness. Without hesitation or probing, the lead alpha storm direwolf lunged forward, its massive frame surging with explosive force, leaving only a gray-black blur in its wake. Its tumor-long body carried hundreds of pounds of impact, its sharp claws gleaming with cold, deadly light. If it hit me, I'd be torn to shreds in an instant. I had never been in a fight in my entire life, let alone faced a bloodthirsty beast like this. Fear seized my heart. My legs stiff and almost immovable, the chill of death crawled up my spine and slammed into my skull. I instinctively raised my arm to block, with only one absurd thought left in my mind. I just escaped the cage of wage slavery, and now I'm going to die in this crappy otherworld. How pathetic. Just as the wolf's claws were about to touch my throat, a cold, emotionless mechanical voice rang directly in my mind. Crystal clear, without a trace of static. Host detected, facing lethal life threat. Ancient creation relic binding successful. Minecraft Otherworld Divine Authority system officially awakened. Newbie starter pack automatically distributed. Unlocked. Basic block generation. Basic tool crafting. Initial physical enhancement. A translucent light blue screen suddenly materialized before my eyes. Visible only to me. The interface was clean and simple. No flashy clutter. With my exclusive creation system authority clearly marked at the top. At the same time, a gentle yet overwhelming force surged through my entire body. My previously weak and stiff limbs suddenly brimmed with explosive power. My tense nerves relaxed, and my senses expanded infinitely. The trajectory of the wolf's pounce became slow and clear in my vision. I had no time to be stunned by the double miracle of the transmigration and the system. Survival instinct consumed every thought. Following the control method, instinctively transmit by the system, I focused my mind and silently commanded, generate block. The next moment, a perfectly angular, hard wooden block materialized out of thin air in front of my right hand, hovering steadily. No energy fluctuation, no sound or movement, just the purest, simplest act of material creation, as if the very rules of this world were mine to command. A rush of exhilaration shot straight to my head. Other people transmigrating to other worlds had to train in magic or hone their martial skills, fighting tooth and nail for even a sliver of combat power. But I could create matter from nothing right from the start. The gap was astronomical. The wolf's claws were inches away, its stinking breath washing over me. My eyes sharpened, and with a flick of my will, I directed the wooden block to slam into the wolf's head. The seemingly plain block, empowered by the system's rules, carried a terrifying impact force. Thump! A heavy, muffled impact exploded through the forest. The ferocious alpha storm direwolf didn't even have time to let out a howl before its skull was crushed inward, its hard bone scales shattering and flying. Its massive body was sent flying backward, crashing heavily to the ground. It twitched twice before going completely still, its blood-red eyes instantly dimming. One strike. Instant kill. I stared blankly at the wolf's corpse on the ground, then looked down at my slightly raised right hand. My heart pounded wildly, not from fear, but from sheer shock and exhilaration. The beast that could have taken my life moments ago was now fragile and helpless against my block ability. The remaining 2 storm direwolves, instead of retreating, were enraged by their companion's death. They both lowered their bodies, emitting low growls from their throats, and flanked me from left and right, their attacks even more vicious and fierce. With the first experience under my belt, I steadied my mind completely. No longer flustered, I willed it again, and 4 wooden blocks materialized simultaneously, splitting into 2 pairs, precisely locking onto the attack paths of the 2 wolves. At that moment, I fully grasped how absurd and overpowered this system was. No incantations, no charging, no stamina consumption, just pure willpower, allowing me to summon basic blocks infinitely, attack, build barriers, and create resources anytime, anywhere. This was true creation-level power. 2 dull thuds rang out almost simultaneously. Both wolves were struck squarely in the torso by the blocks, their hard bodies shattered, bones breaking. They tumbled and crashed to the ground, struggling for a moment before dying completely. In just a few seconds, 3 otherworldly beasts capable of slaughtering ordinary adventurers had all fallen at my hands. The forest fell silent again, leaving only the rustle of wind through the leaves and the 3 cold wolf corpses. I let out a long breath, my tense body finally relaxing. My back was soaked with cold sweat, but a blazing fire had ignited in my heart. I looked down at the system screen before me, which refreshed with the latest status information, clear and intuitive. Host: Elias Thorne. Abilities: Basic block generation, basic tool crafting, initial physical enhancement. Unlocked blocks: wood, dirt, stone. Current status: physique slightly above human baseline, adapted to otherworld survival rules. System note: this system originates from an ancient creation civilization relic. Abilities have no upper limit. Each new permission unlocked will simultaneously bear the hidden shackles of that civilization. I stared at the last line, my brow furrowing slightly. Ancient creation civilization relic. Hidden shackles. All the previous prompts were about incredible, advantageous abilities, but this one carried an unsettling undertone. The system wasn't a free gift. From the moment it activated, it had already bound me to unknown costs and hidden dangers. But right now, having just turned the tables in a life-or-death situation and wielding this godlike creation power, I was still immersed in the thrill of invincibility, unable to fully grasp the looming crisis behind those words. I pushed aside the faint doubt in my heart and swept my gaze across the dim, savage forest, an unfamiliar world, bloodthirsty beasts, a mysterious system, and the hidden shackles lurking beneath. My otherworldly life had begun. Hastily, in a life-or-death slaughter, I raised my hand and waved, willing dozens of dirt blocks to stack out of thin air, quickly forming a simple protective barrier around me. Looking at the man-made structure that had appeared from nothing, I couldn't help but smirk. Since fate had thrown me here and given me this world-shattering creation system, there was no need for me to remain that ordinary nobody anymore. This otherworld's magic, dragons, kingdom conflicts, and the secrets hidden within the system starting today, I, Elias Thorne, would take them all into my own hands. The evening wind swept through the forest, carrying the wild breath of this untamed world. My gaze pierced through the layers of ancient trees, fixing on the distant mountain outlines barely visible on the horizon, my eyes gleaming with the sharp edge of newfound ambition. After taking down the 3 storm direwolves, the immediate danger in the forest had passed. But I knew this savage woodland was no safe haven. The dark purple sky was growing even gloomier, and it wouldn't be long before night fully fell. The nights in this otherworld were far more dangerous than the days. With high-tier beasts emerging in force, a simple dirt barrier wouldn't hold against the tide of monsters that would come. I had to build a secure, long-term stronghold before dark. I scanned the surroundings, searching for a suitable location. Not far away, there was a gently sloping hillside at a higher elevation, backed by a solid rock face. The front offered an open view with no dense trees blocking it, perfect for avoiding sneak attacks from behind while spotting threats approaching from ahead. It was an ideal spot for a base. Without hesitation, I strode toward the slope, passing the wolf corpses. With a casual thought, I recalled the scattered wooden blocks back into the system space, wasting no resources. Once I reached the center of the slope, I directly activated the system's power. Compared to when I first awakened, I was now completely adept at mental control. Neatly shaped stones and logs materialized out of thin air, automatically stacking, joining, and reinforcing themselves according to the layout I envisioned. There was no tedious construction process, no limitations of tools or materials. Pure power of rule-based creation made building fortifications the simplest of tasks. I first laid a level foundation with thick stone blocks, stacking them layer by layer to form half-meter-thick walls, enclosing a courtyard large enough to accommodate dozens of people. Then, using logs, I erected 2 orderly wooden cabins, their walls tightly fitted, their roofs covered with wooden planks that blocked light and rain. Finally, I added high protective fences around the courtyard, leaving lookout gaps at the corners for easy observation of the surroundings. In less than 10 minutes, a sturdy, Simple yet imposing fortress appeared out of nowhere on the barren slope. The walls were hard and thick. The claws and fangs of ordinary magical beasts couldn't breach them. Compared to the dilapidated and desolate environment around it, this log-cabin fortress seemed like a divine miracle, out of place yet utterly awe-inspiring, standing in the center of the courtyard. Looking at the stronghold I had built with my own hands, my confidence grew. In this strange and dangerous world, I finally had a foothold of my own, just as I was about to refine the fortress's defenses and forge basic stone weapons. Faint sobbing and soft footsteps came from the edge of the woods. I instantly focused my mind, activated my physical enhancement ability, and fixed my gaze on the source of the sound, ready to deploy blocks to defend. Moments later, several ragged, gaunt figures cautiously emerged from the forest. Old people, children, and a few young men holding rusty iron spears, covered in wounds. Their faces were filled with fear, their bodies smeared with dirt and blood. They were refugees from the kingdom in this region, likely commoners fleeing the ravages of magical beasts and the tyranny of the royal family. When they saw the abruptly appearing stony and wood fortress and me standing calmly, their eyes were filled with shock and disbelief. They froze in place, not daring to approach or retreat. Just as the atmosphere grew tense, a steady, hoarse voice came from the back of the crowd, breaking the silence. "Sir, forgive my intrusion. We are only fleeing commoners, not villains. If we have disturbed you, we will leave immediately." The speaker was a middle-aged man, tall and straight. Though his clothes were tattered and his face weary, his posture was upright. His eyes sharp and steady. Faint traces of weapon wear and old scars lingered on his body, clearly a veteran of many battles. He stepped out from the crowd, bowed slightly to me, his demeanor respectful but not servile, perfectly balanced. I raised my hand slightly to indicate it was fine, speaking calmly. "No need to be formal. This place has no owner. You don't have to hide." The man sighed in relief, then gave a bitter smile and introduced himself. "I am Karen Brooks, a former border guard veteran of the Roland Kingdom. Due to years of heavy taxes from the royal family, oppression by the nobility, and the rampant magical beasts, the border defenses completely collapsed. I led the surviving villagers into the mountains, wandering all the way, losing more than half to death." Karen's words were filled with helplessness and resentment, making it clear he had long lost all hope in the corrupt royal family. He looked up at the sturdy fortress, then at me, who had created it from nothing, and a deep awe flickered in his eyes. In his decades of life, he had seen mages summon elemental forces and swordsmen slay fierce beasts, but never had he seen someone build an entire fortress out of thin air. This ability surpassed any profession he knew. Just then, two fierce roars came from deep in the woods. Two small black-striped jackals burst out, their eyes fixed on the children among the crowd. Charging forward at incredible speed, the refugees panicked instantly. The elderly and children screamed and dodged, while the young men raised their rusty weapons, trembling, utterly powerless to resist. Karen's face changed color. He immediately stepped forward to shield the crowd, gripping his rusted iron spear, gritting his teeth, ready to fight to the death. His wounds had not healed, and his stamina was completely drained. He couldn't withstand the charge of two beasts. The likely outcome was severe injury or death. Seeing this, I no longer stood by. With a thought, 6 sharp stone blocks materialized in the air, shooting out like hidden weapons with precision. A few whooshing sounds cut through the air, and the stones struck the heads of the two black-striped jackals, instantly piercing their skulls. The beasts didn't even get close to the crowd before they fell to the ground, dead. The entire process was clean and efficient. Without a hint of delay, the scene fell into dead silence. All the refugees stared wide-eyed at me, their faces full of shock. Karen's hand tightened on his spear, his astonishment reaching its peak. He was now certain that the young man before him was a transcendent being with divine power, no ordinary adventurer or mage. He paused for a few seconds, then suddenly dropped to one knee, speaking solemnly. "Sir, you possess supreme power, and show kindness to us insignificant beings. We are now homeless, with death ahead on every path. I, Karen, am willing to abandon all my past and swear to follow you, to guard your stronghold, to charge into battle, and never betray you." With that, he bowed his head deeply, his attitude utterly sincere. The refugees behind him quickly followed suit, all bowing and pleading to stay within the fortress, seeking a measure of protection. I looked at Karen kneeling before me and understood. He had practical combat experience, was steady and reliable, and understood the world. He was the first ally worth recruiting since I arrived in this world. Going it alone in a foreign realm was too passive. Taking in these refugees, especially recruiting Karen, would allow me to quickly establish roots and build my initial power base. I nodded slightly, my tone firm. "Rise. Since you are willing to follow me, from now on, this fortress is your sanctuary. As long as I am here, no magical beasts will intrude, and no nobles will disturb you." Karen looked up sharply, a fierce light igniting in his eyes. He nodded heavily. "I obey. I will follow you to the death, my lord." At that moment, I officially gained my first follower and my first group of subjects. Watching the now settled crowd and looking at the fortress I had built with my own hands, I clearly sensed that my path to rise in this foreign world had truly begun, and I knew this was only the start. The royal family's gaze would soon lock onto this suddenly emerging stronghold. And greater storms were already brewing in the shadows. After taking in Karen and his group of refugees, the small forest fortress became lively. I assigned everyone tasks to rest and reorganize. Some cleared weeds and animal carcasses around the fortress. Others gathered dry wood for fires to keep warm, and still others repaired the temporary wooden cabins. After enduring long periods of wandering, these refugees finally had a stable place to settle. The despair that once marked their faces had faded, replaced by a more settled complexion. Karen handled things with great reliability. He took the initiative to oversee guard duty, distribute supplies, and maintain order, turning the chaotic refugee group into a well-organized unit, completely freeing me from worry. Night slowly fell, the dark purple sky turning pitch black. The roars of beasts in the mountains grew denser, echoing back and forth, but none dared approach my fortress. The high walls of stone blocks seemed like an invisible chasm, isolating all the wild dangers. I stood at the lookout point on the wall, watching the people living peacefully below, knowing that this stability was only temporary. The shallow resources around the fortress were limited. To establish a long-term foothold and even expand my influence, I had to venture out to gather more resources and unlock more system permissions. After a brief instruction to Karen to guard the fortress and keep a strict watch, I set out alone, carrying simple stone weapons, and stepped into the outer forest under the moonlight. After 2 days of adaptation, I had shed the initial unease of arriving in this foreign world. My basic physical enhancement gave me night vision, stamina, and reflexes far beyond ordinary people. Common low-level magical beasts posed no threat to me. My goal for this trip was simple: gather more logs and mineral resources, while scouting the surrounding terrain to understand the distribution of forces and magical beasts in this area. About half a kilometer into the dense forest, the trees grew thicker, the mist between them denser, and the smell of blood in the air suddenly intensified several times over. Unlike the scent of beast battles before, this time it was mixed with a faint human blood smell, carrying a tragic undertone. I immediately shed my relaxed attitude, heightened all my senses, lightened my steps, and moved quickly forward along the trail of blood, passing through a tangle of vines and trees. A tragic scene unfolded in the clearing ahead. A woman in a damaged silver-white knight's armor was locked in combat with several fanged beasts. Her armor was covered in cracks, stained with dark red blood in many places. The armor on her right arm was completely shattered, revealing a pale arm covered in wounds of varying depths, blood seeping out and soaking her clothes. This was Seraphina Walker, someone I would trust deeply for a long time to come. At this moment, her posture was upright, even though she was severely wounded and exhausted. Her left hand, gripping the sword, remained steady. Each strike was precise and fierce, displaying exceptional knightly combat skills. But her opponents were 7-clawed magic wolves, fast and coordinated, constantly circling and pulling back, draining the last of her stamina. I observed coldly for a moment, clearly seeing her predicament. Her swordsmanship far surpassed that of ordinary kingdom soldiers. She was undoubtedly a high-ranking Orthodox knight, but her injuries were too severe, and she was outnumbered. Her stamina was nearly depleted, and her sword moves were beginning to show flaws. Defeat was only a matter of time. I could see the tenacity and stubbornness in her eyes, even as blood seeped from her wounds and her body swayed unsteadily. She showed no sign of retreat or begging for mercy. She only clenched her jaw tightly, desperately fending off the beast's relentless attacks. A sharp-claw shadow wolf seized the moment when she paused to catch her breath, suddenly accelerating, sidestepping the blade, and striking with its sharp claws gleaming coldly toward her lower back. The attack was swift and vicious. In her current state, she had no way to dodge. If it landed, she would surely be gravely wounded, on the verge of death. Without a second glance, I acted directly. With a flick of my mind, several hard stone cubes materialized out of thin air, like precision-guided projectiles, shooting out with a sharp whistling sound. Thud, thud, thud. A series of dull impacts rang out. The lunging shark-claw shadow wolf's head was instantly crushed by the stones, its body crashing heavily to the ground, completely lifeless. The remaining 6 shadow wolves immediately went on alert, turning in unison to lock onto my position, letting out vicious snarls. Abandoning the severely injured Seraphina, they charged at me as a pack, facing the onrushing beasts. My expression remained calm, my steps steady as a rock. I continuously activated the system's ability, conjuring cubes one after another, smashing, blocking, or sealing off their paths. There were no flashy techniques, just the most basic cube constructs overwhelmed these ferocious shadow wolves. Within seconds, all the remaining shark-claw shadow wolves lay dead on the ground, their corpses scattered, and the danger in the forest was instantly cleared. The entire process was fluid and effortless. Seraphina stood still, sword in hand, breathing heavily, her eyes wide with shock as she looked at me. The deadly predicament she had barely escaped with all her strength had been effortlessly resolved by me in an instant. She slowly sheathed her sword, clutching her bleeding wound, and walked toward me step by step. She knelt on one knee, her posture respectful but not servile. "Thank you, sir, for saving my life. I am Seraphina Walker, a knight of the Roland Kingdom. I was ambushed by a pack of beasts during a mission and nearly perished. I am deeply grateful for your rescue," she said, her voice soft, tinged with exhaustion. Her eyes were clear and pure, the picture of an upright, kind-hearted, and helpless female knight. I looked down at her and spoke calmly. "It was nothing. No need for formalities." She rose slowly, lifting her gaze to meet mine, a hint of earnestness and confusion in her eyes. "This forest is overrun with magical beasts, and the royal power has collapsed. I have nowhere left to go. Sir, your strength is extraordinary, and your heart is kind. Might I be permitted to follow you? I am skilled in swordsmanship, reconnaissance, and military logistics. I can handle trivial matters for you and will never be a burden." After a brief moment of thought, I nodded in agreement. Karen excelled at managing internal affairs and leading the refugees, while Seraphina, as a proper knight, was undoubtedly proficient in combat and troop formations. She would perfectly fill the gap in my combat strength. Having another capable assistant would greatly benefit my efforts to expand my influence and deal with the royal crisis. "All right," I replied simply, with a thought. I generated several soft cloth cubes and clean water cubes, handing them to her. "Tend to your wounds briefly, then return to the fortress with me to rest." A flicker of warmth passed through Seraphina's eyes, and she bowed solemnly. "Thank you, sir. I will not let you down." I turned and walked toward the fortress, unaware that in that moment, the softness and gratitude in her eyes quickly faded, replaced by a faint, icy hatred and restraint. That emotion was deeply hidden, fleeting, perfectly masked beneath her docile exterior. Her following was never a coincidence, and her gratitude was all a facade. She stayed by my side, appearing as a fallen knight clinging to a strong survivor, but in truth, she was lying in wait, biding her time for the perfect moment to overturn everything and exact her revenge. The blood debt of an ancient civilization, the overwhelming hatred of a fallen family, all buried deep in her heart, waiting for a single, fatal strike. I knew nothing of this. Believing I had gained a loyal and powerful subordinate, the evening breeze swept through the forest. Carrying a cool touch, I led my newly acquired follower, Seraphina, steadily toward the faintly lit fortress. I thought this was the beginning of my power's growth, unaware that a lurking, earth-shattering conspiracy had already quietly entangled me and my system. After bringing Seraphina back, the fortress's overall combat strength was fully rounded out. During the day, I personally guided everyone in repairing the defenses and organizing the camp. Seraphina, drawing on her experience as a proper knight, trained the able-bodied refugees in basic weapon handling and formation coordination. Karen, meanwhile, continued to oversee logistics and camp order. In just one day, the once disorganized refugee group was transformed, taking the shape of a small armed force, their morale and spirit completely renewed. I had planned to rest for a few days and continue gathering resources to unlock new system abilities, but trouble never gives the weak time to develop. Nor does it allow an unknown force to rise quietly. The next day at noon, the sky was clear, and the forest was unusually quiet. Only the sound of steady, heavy footsteps echoed from a distance, cutting through the wind and heading straight toward the fortress. Seraphina, who was training the group, immediately tensed. Her hand rested on the sword at her waist, her eyes alert as she looked toward the source of the sound. She whispered a warning. "Sir, those are the marching footsteps of the royal army. There are many of them, not an ordinary patrol squad." Karen also quickly raised her hand to halt the training, ordering all able-bodied men to arm themselves and form a defensive line. The refugees hurriedly retreated into the fortress to hide, and the entire camp instantly entered a state of readiness. Moments later, a squad of royal soldiers in exquisite silver armor, armed with long spears and heavy shields, emerged from the trees. They formed neat ranks and halted 100 meters from the fortress. At the front of the formation stood a richly dressed officer, a golden-laid longsword at his waist. His demeanor was arrogant, his eyes full of condescending superiority, exuding the haughtiness of the privileged class from head to toe. He was the captain of the personal guard under Regent Valentine of the Roland Kingdom. Named Reed, he was specifically tasked with patrolling the border forests and eliminating rogue forces. Reed's gaze swept over the sturdy, but built stony and wood fortress, then over the armed group standing guard. A flicker of surprise crossed his eyes, quickly turning into cold disdain. This remote border forest had long been abandoned by the royal family, home only to refugees and magical beasts. No one had ever dared to build a city or fortify it privately, let alone construct such solid defenses. He stepped forward and spoke in a commanding, oppressive tone. "Nameless savages, you have trespassed on royal land, built a fortress without permission, and gathered a private force, all violations of the kingdom's laws. Tear down your fortifications immediately, surrender all supplies and grain, and follow me back to the royal city to face judgment." You may receive leniency. If you resist, you will be killed without mercy. His domineering words sent a wave of panic through the refugees below. They were fugitives fleeing the royal family's harsh policies, and nothing terrified them more than being hunted down by the royal army. Karen frowned, stepping forward half a pace to argue firmly. This place is desolate and overrun with beasts. The royal family has long abandoned it. We are merely refugees trying to survive, building a fortress to protect ourselves. We have committed no crime. What fault is there in that? How dare you? Reed roared, killing intent flashing in his eyes. Every inch of royal land belongs to the crown. You lowlifes have no right to argue. I am ordered to patrol the border, and any private gathering of forces or unauthorized construction will be eliminated. Out of consideration for your ignorance, if you hand over all your supplies and grain, and have your leader kneel and accept punishment, I will spare all your lives. His gaze locked onto me, certain that I was the leader of this force. In his eyes, a group of unarmed refugees, even with a crude fortress, could never stand against a well-equipped, well-trained royal army. I would have no choice but to submit and beg for mercy. I slowly descended the steps of the wall, facing the entire royal army, my expression calm and unafraid. Throughout my journey, I had already seen the decay and coldness of this kingdom. The nobles only knew how to exploit the people and fight for power, never caring about the suffering and displacement of the lower classes, since seeking a peaceful life only invited relentless pressure and bullying. There was no need for me to hold back any longer. You want supplies. You want me to kneel and accept punishment, I said calmly, my tone carrying a heavy weight of pressure. Just you, Reed erupted in fury, his face burning with humiliation. You arrogant brat. How dare you challenge the royal army's might? All troops, hear my command. Breach the fortress. Capture the leader. Take them all. Dozens of royal soldiers immediately raised their shields and spears, charging in formation toward the fortress. Their spears gleamed coldly, their ranks tight, their momentum overwhelming a standard battlefield assault formation capable of easily slaughtering several times their number in refugees. Serafina immediately drew her sword, ready to charge, and Karen gripped her spear, prepared to lead a desperate defense. But I raised my hand to stop them. No need to fight. Just watch. With a thought, I activated the system's ability. A flood of hard stone cubes materialized out of thin air, rapidly stacking up in front of the fortress. Layer upon layer of stone walls rose from the ground, arranged in staggered patterns, forming a massive defensive barrier 10 meters long and 3 meters high, completely blocking the enemy's charge route. At the same time, dozens of sharp stone spear cubes hovered in midair, precisely aimed at the charging soldiers, ready to strike. The advancing royal soldiers, caught off guard, slammed into the hard stone wall. Their formation instantly collapsed, the front ranks thrown into chaos, with soldiers tumbling and screaming in pain. Before they could get up and regroup, the stone spears in the air shot out instantly, landing precisely on the empty ground beside the soldiers. They exploded into fine stone shards, the powerful shockwave sending large numbers of soldiers flying. No one was injured, but their combat effectiveness was completely shattered. In an instant, the imposing royal charge formation completely collapsed, with dozens of elite soldiers sprawling to the ground in panic and scrambling for cover, their dignity as a regular army utterly shattered. Jared's pupils contracted sharply, his face a mask of shock, his body frozen stiff. The ability to conjure walls and spears out of thin air, such an inconceivable power, had already surpassed the limits of ordinary mages. It was a force he could never hope to contend with. He finally realized that the person he had provoked was no mere leader of refugees, but a hidden extraordinary powerhouse. I walked slowly to the panicked Jared, looking down at his pale face. Go back and tell Valentine, this woodland, this fortress, from today onward, belongs to me. If the royal family dares to come again to stir up trouble and oppress the people, I won't hesitate to personally level your border garrison camp. The crushing reversal of fortune stripped Jared of all his arrogance. Trembling all over, he dared not utter a single word of rebuttal. He scrambled to his feet, leading his battered troops in a hasty retreat, fleeing the forest without daring to look back, terrified that I might raise a hand and annihilate them all. As the enemy forces fully withdrew, everyone in the fortress erupted in suppressed cheers. The refugees looked at me with eyes full of admiration, their earlier fear completely transformed into confidence and reverence. With this battle, I had firmly established my foothold in this border woodland, while also forging a deep enmity with the royal regent, Valentine. I knew this was only the beginning. The humiliated royal family would not let this rest. Larger-scale sieges and crises were rapidly approaching. After repelling the royal army, the morale of the entire fortress reached its peak. The refugees, once anxious and uneasy, no longer had to fear the oppression of the royal family or the harassment of magical beasts. Everyone now truly believed in me, the strong one who had appeared out of nowhere. Karen, seizing the high morale, worked through the night to perfect the fortress's duty system, establishing a rotating patrol schedule to eliminate any risk of sneak attacks. Serafina, meanwhile, focused on honing the troops' combat effectiveness. training the soldiers in team coordination and emergency combat techniques, turning this makeshift armed force into a more professional and elite unit. I was well aware that the current peace was only temporary. The Regent Valentine was proud and stubborn, having suffered this loss of face and defeat. He would certainly not let things slide. Within days, he would inevitably dispatch stronger armies, even recruit mages, to come and besiege us. My current basic block abilities were more than enough to handle ordinary soldiers, but against extraordinary professionals and large-scale regular armies, there were still shortcomings. To truly stand firm and even gain the capital to contend with the royal family, I had to unlock the system's new abilities as soon as possible and comprehensively enhance my combat power. Late that night, when everyone had rested and the camp had fallen silent, I stood alone on the highest stone watchtower of the fortress, activating the system's light screen to attempt unlocking new permissions. The consecutive slaying of magical beasts and the defeat of the royal army had accumulated a vast amount of system energy, already meeting the conditions for advancement. The moment I willed it, the pale blue system screen lit up, and lines of new prompt text rapidly refreshed. Detected sufficient host energy reserves. Advancement conditions met. Successfully unlocked deep mining permissions. Rare mineral generation ability. And advanced forging functions. Generatable minerals. Coal, iron ore, gold ore, diamond, ancient secret gold. Unlocked recipes. Full set of alloy battle armor. Divine warblade. Defensive enchanted equipment. The new system abilities surged in, several times more powerful than the basic block abilities. A sharp glint flashed in my eyes. Basic blocks could only build fortifications and handle simple offense and defense, but the mineral forging ability meant I could mass-produce divine weapons and top-tier armor, completely closing the gap with the ordinary combat power of this world. Without any delay, I immediately activated the new mining ability. Unlike traditional mining, which required time-consuming digging and ore sorting, my system ability could directly lock onto underground mineral veins and condense purified minerals out of thin air. With a thought, various ores began to emerge endlessly from thin air on the open ground beside the fortress, piling up into small mountains of minerals. Black coal, dark iron, glittering gold, translucent diamonds stacked layer upon layer. The most special was the ancient secret gold, shimmering with a faint purple luster. Heavy in texture and containing weak extraordinary energy, the top-tier rare ore of this other world. I continued to activate the ability for 10 minutes, and the reserves of various minerals skyrocketed. Iron ore exceeded 30,000 units. Gold ore surpassed 10,000 units. Diamonds reached 8,000 units, and the most precious ancient secret gold had accumulated 2,000 units. The total resource reserves had completely broken through the 100,000 mark. Looking at the mountain of rare resources before me, I had completely escaped the early predicament of material scarcity, and now possessed the capital for unlimited development. With resources in place, the next step was to forge divine-grade equipment. I opened the system's advanced forging interface and, with one click, locked onto the full set of offensive and defensive equipment recipes, from close-fitting battle armor, main battle blade, and defensive shield, to portable hidden weapons and emergency enchanted talismans, covering all necessary tools for the battlefield. System forging required no furnace, no hammering. It was purely condensed and shaped by the power of rules, with efficiency far surpassing the most forging masters of this other world. Streams of light flickered as the hard minerals were rapidly smelted, shaped, and enchanted under the system's power. In just half an hour, a full set of battle armor took shape, entirely black, inlaid with diamond patterns, and flowing with a faint glow of secret gold. The armor fit the body perfectly, light and without burden, yet came with a powerful defense buff, capable of withstanding triple damage from swords, magic, and beastly strength. The accompanying 3-foot war blade gleamed with a cold light, its blade carrying a built-in armor-piercing enchantment. Ordinary armor shattered on contact, its power terrifying to the extreme. I donned the full set of divine equipment, and my entire aura instantly transformed. What was once merely a physique surpassing ordinary humans was now, with the support of the equipment, doubled in offensive and defensive attributes. A faint pressure of rules emanated from my body, even without moving a muscle. I exuded the presence of a powerhouse. With the initial physical enhancement combined with the divine equipment, even facing the royal family's high-ranking mages and elite knights Hedon, I had the absolute confidence to crush them. The next morning, Karen and Seraphina rose early for their rounds. When they saw the mountains of rare ores piled up on the open ground and me with my completely changed aura, they were instantly stunned. Seraphina, as an orthodox knight, knew well the scarcity of a top-tier set of enchanted equipment in this other world. Even the royal family, exhausting all their resources, might not be able to forge a single diamond enchanted item. Yet I had not only casually created a full set of divine equipment but also stockpiled 100,000 units of rare resources. This ability had completely overturned her understanding. Karen's eyes widened, and she bowed deeply, her face full of shock. My lord's divine power is unparalleled. With such resources and divine weapons, Our troops' combat power will surely skyrocket. Even if the royal army descends upon us, we can stand against them heathen. I nodded slightly. My gaze fixed on the direction of the royal capital in the distance. Vast resources, a full set of divine equipment, and new abilities had completely freed me from a passive defensive position. Before, I only wanted to establish a stable foothold in this other world. Now, I already possessed the capital to contend for dominance. Beside me, Seraphina lowered her head, hiding the complex emotions in her eyes. The more powerful my world-creating abilities became, the more they aligned with the origin of the ancient creation civilization. The stronger the hatred and vengeful obsession buried deep in her heart grew. Yet she remained docile and respectful, concealing all her feelings without a trace, continuing to play the role of a loyal follower. I didn't notice her strangeness. At this moment, I was fully confident that Valentine's siege would only end up being a farce that brought humiliation upon himself. With endless resources and divine-level combat power in hand, this borderland was now mine to rule, with divine armor donned and resources abundant. I had completely abandoned the idea of passive defense. For the rest of the day, I didn't limit myself to forging equipment. Instead, relying on the new minerals and system permissions, I began a systematic upgrade of the entire fortress's defense system. Ordinary stone and wooden walls were no longer suitable for my current level of power and couldn't withstand the impact of a large-scale, high-tier beast tide. Only by building a systematic, mechanized defensive fortification could I truly ensure absolute safety. I used a massive stockpile of ores to activate the system and generate a full set of redstone mechanism components, redstone powder, pressure plates, dispensers, aero blocks, and so on. These technological creations from the system were offensive and defensive methods never seen before in this magical otherworld, completely transcending the rules of traditional martial arts and magic. Karen led a group of sturdy refugees to assist with transport and organization. While Seraphina observed the entire process, her eyes filled with shock. She simply couldn't understand how these seemingly ordinary redstone parts could contain such bizarre and powerful energy, with the main fortress as the core. I expanded outward to build 3 concentric rings of defensive belts. The walls were entirely replaced with hard blocks of ancient secret gold mixed with diamonds, their hardness far surpassing any metal material in this other world. Inside each layer of the wall, dense redstone dispensers were hidden. Beneath the walls, a full coverage pressure-sensitive mechanism was laid. As long as any beast stepped into the warning range, the defensive mechanisms would trigger automatically. In just one day, the simple forest fortress had transformed into a super stronghold, integrating hard walls, automatic offense and defense, and full area surveillance. Just as I was finishing the last mechanism, the ground began to tremble slightly. From the distant forest came an endless, overwhelming roar of beasts. The howls layered upon each other, piercing the entire airspace, carrying a frenzied murderous intent that chilled the heart. Karen's face changed drastically. She rushed to the watchtower and reported in a deep voice, "My lord, it's a large-scale beast tide. Judging by the sound, the scale is enormous, nothing like the scattered beasts we've seen before." Seraphina immediately drew her sword and formed a battle formation, her expression grave. "There hasn't been a beast tide of this scale in the border mountains for years. It's highly likely that our recent frequent activities and defeat of the royal army have stirred up the beast lord deep in the mountains." I climbed to a high vantage point, my gaze piercing through the dense layers of forest, instantly seeing the distant scene clearly. Countless magical beasts surged like a black tide from all directions toward my fortress, low-level black-striped jackals, windthorn wolves, and bone-spiked boars beyond number, blanketing the entire mountain landscape. A rough estimate put them in the tens of thousands. At the forefront of the beast tide, a colossal beast 3 zhang tall, its body covered in ink-black bone armor and a single horn atop its head, advanced slowly. A faint, demonic aura swirled around it, its pressure dominating all directions. It was an ancient rockhorn beast, the native overlord of these mountains, far stronger than any magical beast I had slain before. It already possessed combat power comparable to a royal grand knight. And it was the core commander of this beast tide. Tens of thousands of beasts, led by an ancient, such a formation could easily trample a small town. Even a royal station there would be forced to retreat step by step, suffering heavy casualties. Panic instantly gripped the refugees inside the fortress. Children's cries and the murmurs of the common people rose and fell, all of them shaken by this apocalyptic scene. Despair taking root in their hearts. "Everyone retreat into the fortress interior. No need to engage. Stay put and await orders," I said calmly, my tone steady as I sought to soothe the crowd. The upgraded redstone defense system was designed precisely for large-scale group battles like this. Today, I would let this witness firsthand what divine-level defensive miracles looked like. The next second, the overwhelming beast tide crashed against the fortress walls. The first dozens of beasts to make contact with the outer wall triggered the ground pressure plates the moment they entered the range. Hundreds of redstone launchers hidden within the walls activated simultaneously. A dense array of enchanted stone arrows and sharp ice cones poured out like an unending storm. mercilessly reaping the lives of the low-level magical beasts. The leading beasts fell in droves, their corpses piling up layer upon layer, yet they couldn't even approach the wall by half a step. Seeing this, the ancient rock-horned beast flew into a rage. It threw its head back and let out a sky-shaking roar, then charged with all its might, ramming into the diamond-and mithril wall despite the arrow rain. Muffled crashing sounds exploded repeatedly. The entire fortress trembled slightly, but not a single crack appeared. The hard wall completely absorbed the beast's brute force, and the recoil sent it stumbling back again and again, its bone armor cracking into fine fissures. I stood on the watchtower, calmly observing the one-sided slaughter. With a flicker of thought, I activated the system to unlock the mechanism and initiate the second layer of defense. The open ground outside the fortress instantly erupted with dense lava blocks and thorn blocks. The scorching lava burned the remaining beasts that surged forward, while the hard thorns tightly trapped those trying to flee. Under this blockade, the beast tide was utterly reduced to lambs for the slaughter. From start to finish, the entire battle saw not a single casualty. Not even a single person lifting a hand to fight. Tens of thousands of magical beasts were completely annihilated by the redstone mechanisms and block walls. The entire perimeter of the fortress was covered in beast corpses. The smell of blood permeating the mountain forced the scene of the last ancient rockhorn beast, its body covered in wounds and its strength completely drained, stared at the unmoving fortress. The ferocity in its eyes turned entirely to fear, and it turned to flee. I raised my hand and waved. Several giant stone blocks descended from the air, crashing down with a thunderous impact, pinning the mountain overlord firmly to the ground. The beast tide was completely wiped out. Heaven and earth returned to silence. The refugees inside the fortress stared blankly at the mountain of beast corpses outside, then looked up at me standing tall on the high platform. A deafening cheer erupted. Everyone fell to their knees, bowing and shouting miracle. In their eyes, I had single-handedly annihilated tens of thousands of beasts with zero losses. Transcending the realm of mortals, a true god descended upon the world. Karen knelt on one knee, her eyes filled with, utterly convinced that following me was the best choice of her life. Beside her, Seraphina looked up at me, the shock in her eyes even deeper, while the shadow and weariness in her heart grew heavier. Every time my power surged, the imprint of the ancient creation civilization became clearer, and the blood-deep hatred she bore grew heavier. I looked down at the kneeling crowd below, knowing in my heart that after this battle, I had firmly established an undefeated legend on this land. I now possessed the absolute capital to win people's hearts and carve out my own territory. But I also vaguely sensed that behind this unfathomable divine power, the hidden price was quietly awakening. The pervasive smell of blood enveloped the entire mountain forest. Tens of thousands of magical beast corpses piled up layer upon layer, like a black mountain of death. I stood on the fortress's watchtower, looking down at the cheering, kneeling people, listening to the chorus of miracle echoing in my ears. Yet in my heart, there was no expected elation, only a lingering strangeness that I couldn't shake. Ever since the system awakened, I had been pushing through powerful enemies, building cities, establishing a nation, and crushing beast tides and nobles. My power had skyrocketed. Everything going so smoothly it felt too deliberate. The hidden lurking deep within the system was now becoming clearer. Karen led a group of young adults to begin clearing the beast corpses, dividing up usable magical beast materials for stockpiling supplies and forging armor. The entire fortress was a busy, orderly scene. After this battle of zero-loss annihilation of tens of thousands of beasts, everyone's worship of me had sunk into their bones. The cohesion of this newborn force had reached an unprecedented peak. Seraphina still silently stood guard at my side, saying nothing, but the look in her eyes held increasingly complex emotions: awe, wariness, and a faint, icy hatred that ordinary people would never notice. I dismissed my attendants, staying alone on the high platform, my gaze falling on the massive corpse of the ancient rockhorn beast below. This mountain overlord that commanded the beast tide was one of the few remaining ancient in this region. Its body carried a faint aura of the ancient era's civilization. Previously, killing ordinary magical beasts only yielded system energy, but the fall of this seemed to have triggered a hidden rule within the system. With a flicker of thought, I activated the system's light screen, ready to settle all rewards from this beast tide kill. On the light screen, a flood of energy points and rare material rewards refreshed, the numbers directly breaking through the 100,000 level. Various forging materials and block rewards were dazzling, enough to elevate my force to another level. Just as I was about to claim the rewards, the light screen interface suddenly twisted, and a line of hidden text I had never seen before appeared. Detected host killing an ancient. Unlocking system log fragment. Ancient creation civilization archive partially unlocked. Lines of obscure, ancient text kept appearing, automatically translating into a language I could understand. A truth sealed for 10,000 years slowly unveiled itself. I focused and read carefully. The peace in my heart was shattered, replaced by a bone-chilling cold and endless confusion. This magical was not naturally formed. It was a world prototype built billions of years ago by the ancient creation civilization using the same block rules and divine creation power. That civilization controlled the same creation SYST. MI now wielded capable of creating things out of nothing, building worlds, setting rules, and with a wave of the hand, opening mountains and seas or annihilating entire races. They were the true masters of this heaven and earth. Yet such an invincible civilization had mysteriously perished. Not a single person remaining, leaving only scattered mountains, rivers, magical beast races, and broken world rules. And the MC creation system in my hands was never a gift from heaven. It was the only remaining core after the ancient civilization's fall. What shook me most was the hidden price recorded at the end of the log. System binding rule. Every time the host borrows the power of the creation civilization to unlock A or enhance combat power, they permanently inherit a portion of the civilization S. The stronger the power, the heavier the. Eventually, the host will completely become A for the civilization's will. Losing self-awareness and becoming a rootless, soulless puppet of the world's rules. I stared at this text, my fingertips growing stiff. So there was never a free, invincible golden finger in this world. Every time I created blocks out of thin air, built divine cities, forged divine weapons, or annihilated beast tides, I was draining the essence of my own existence. I thought I was the chosen one, the creation god descended upon this, but in the end, I was just a tool being assimilated by the rules. Carrying the of an ancient civilization, I continued reading the remaining logs, vaguely piecing together more fragments of the truth. The ancient creation civilization didn't perish naturally. It was because all its members were assimilated by the system S, losing themselves and becoming rule puppets. Eventually, the civilization stagnated and self-destructed, leaving only Thizbound world and the sleeping system. And every step of my rise now was repeating the trajectory of that ancient civilization's fall. The hidden the system had hinted at before was never an empty. It was a real, irreversible fate. I raised my hand and looked at my palm. These very hands, relying on the system's power, had built the fortress, protected the people, and crushed powerful enemies, turning me from A into a regional overlord. But now, these hands no longer brought me confidence. They brought only cold panic. I began frantically recalling every detail of my journey every time I unlocked an ability. Every time my power surged, it corresponded to a silent of. From basic blocks to rare minerals, from redstone mechanisms to divine equipment. The stronger I became, the closer I was to losing myself and becoming a puppet. The wind swept across the high platform, rustling my clothes. Below, the crowd still cheered and bustled, everyone believing I possessed unmatched divine power and a boundless future. Only I knew that my path to invincibility had been written with a tragic ending from the very start. For the first time, I deeply questioned my own rise. Was I desperately developing, waging wars, and consolidating power to establish myself in this other world and claim kingship? Or was I merely completing a new cycle of rule revival for a long-lost ancient civilization? Was I Elias Thorne? Or was I the next generation of a civilization puppet, destined to be assimilated? Endless confusion and doubt surged within me, overwhelming my entire being. But after a brief moment of panic, I quickly suppressed the turmoil in my heart. The journal had only unlocked fragments, not the full truth. The shackles might not be without a solution. Now that my power was initially established and dangers lurked everywhere, the royal family's revenge, hidden conspiracies yet to unfold, I could not afford to sink into despair at this moment. I took a deep breath, dismissed the system's light screen, and the naivety and arrogance in my eyes faded, replaced by a deeper vigilance and wariness. I would still continue to grow stronger, expand, and dominate this world, but from now on, I would no longer blindly rely on the system. I would tear open the truth buried for millennia with my own hands and find the only way to break free from the shackles and control myself. After learning of the ancient shackles hidden within the system, I completely reined in my reckless and arrogant attitude, shedding the restlessness that came with initially gaining invincible abilities. I no longer pursued the rapid surge of power. Instead, I began to steadily and methodically build my own influence. Since I couldn't immediately break the civilization's shackles, I needed to control enough resources and leverage. Only by reaching the pinnacle of this world could I have the right to defy fate and rewrite the outcome of assimilation. The miracle of annihilating tens of thousands of beasts swept through the entire border region like a raging storm. Scat, tiered refugees, small villages, and down-and-out adventurers from dozens of miles around abandoned their original homes and flocked to my fortress in droves. In this chaotic world overrun by monsters and corrupted by the royal family, a fortress that could wipe out a beast tide with zero losses and shelter the people was the only pure land and salvation in everyone's hearts. I accepted all who came seeking refuge, relying on the system's endless resource reserves to properly settle each person. I distributed massive amounts of stone and wood blocks, expanding residential areas outside the main fortress, organizing streets, setting up shops, and clearing farmland. Step by step, I transformed the once purely military fortress into a fully functional, stable, and prosperous border city. Karen's organizational skills reached their peak during this time. She refined the city's management system, dividing it into departments for security, farming, forging, and watch duty. Each department performed its duties in an orderly manner, allowing the new city of tens of thousands to operate smoothly. Serafina took full charge of military training. She abandoned the rigid training methods of the royal family and, based on practical combat experience, crafted a streamlined and powerful combat system. She screened and organized thousands of able-bodied young men, forging an elite force far superior to the royal family's ordinary troops. In just 10 days, the number of subjects under my command exceeded 30,000, and my armed forces expanded to 2,000. I now controlled the entire border no man's land, firmly establishing myself as a true regional hegemon. All the scattered forces in the surrounding area submitted to me without a hint of dissent. The border territory of the Roland Kingdom had been forcibly torn away from the royal family's control. Standing atop the main tower of the newly built city, overlooking the bustling streets and the peaceful lives below, my heart was a mix of emotions. The prosperity before me was entirely created by my reliance on the system. I was revered by tens of thousands. My power at its peak, across the entire border. No one could rival me, and no one dared to challenge me. But the more glorious things seemed, the stronger my wariness grew. The shackles of the ancient civilization hung over my head like a sword of Damocles. All the glory I now possessed could very well be a trap that would backfire on me. On the surface, I remained the invincible, people-loving creator of this world, comforting my subjects, organizing the city, and inspecting defenses, everything proceeding as usual. But in private, I began to deliberately curb my use of the system's abilities. I no longer casually unlocked new permissions. Instead, I focused on honing my physical combat skills and practical techniques, trying to break free from my extreme dependence on the system and find a breakthrough to escape the shackles. All my restraint, vigilance, and planning were meticulously hidden without a trace. But I couldn't fool Serafina, who was always by my side. During this time, she never left my side. On the surface, she appeared diligent, loyal, and obedient, but in truth, she was constantly observing my state and probing the system's secrets. She accurately caught the shift in my mindset, sensing that I had uncovered the system's secrets, that I was no longer the pure, power-reliant, and open-hearted traveler from another world. This change accelerated the revenge plan she had been nurturing for years. As night deepened, the city was brightly lit, with guards patrolling in orderly rows. The entire area was peaceful and secure. Everyone was immersed in the stability of this prosperous era, unaware that a deadly undercurrent was quietly stirring. Under the pretext of inspecting the night defenses, Serafina quietly left the main city, venturing alone deep into the forest to a hidden ancient ruin. This was a former secret stronghold of her clan and the foundation of her long-laid plans. She reached up and removed an unremarkable silver pendant from her neck. The moment it touched the air, it emitted a faint, dark glow, and a hidden communication array was quietly activated. Her voice shed its usual gentleness and warmth, turning icy and piercing, carrying years of pent-up hatred. The target has fully risen, controls the core power of creation, and appears to have sensed the truth of the civilization's shackles. Advance the plan. Contact the remnants of the royal family. Prepare for a pincer attack and overthrow. A low response came from the other end of the array, the surviving old noble factions of the Roland Kingdom. The hidden cards she had been colluding with. These people were dissatisfied with Regent Valentine's tyrannical rule and feared my rapid rise. They had long since formed a secret alliance with Serafina, waiting for the right moment to use her to destroy my power and then seize control of the kingdom. After ending the communication, Serafina stood amidst the ruins, gazing toward the brightly lit city. There was no warmth in her eyes, only bone-chilling cold. She looked at the prosperous city I had built, at the people's fervent admiration for me, and felt nothing but overwhelming hatred. The system that had enabled my rise, the power of creation I controlled, these were the very things that had destroyed her clan and wiped out the ancient descendants. All the glory I possessed was built on the blood and tears of her family's ruin. She had endured, hidden, pretended to follow me, gradually drawing close and earning my trust. All of it was to wait for the moment when my power was at its peak, when I stood at the summit only to personally drag me down from the pedestal and make me experience the despair of her family's destruction and her clan's annihilation. I stood atop the high tower, overlooking the lights of 10,000 homes, believing I had everything under control. But I never realized that the deadliest blade had always been at my side. I had been carefully planning to fight against the ancient fate, but I never guarded against the earth-shattering conspiracy of those closest to me. A betrayal capable of toppling all my foundations was already brewing, waiting only for the final net to close. The next morning, the sun pierced through the mist, bathing the entire border city in light. The market was lively, the streets orderly, the people living in peace. 2,000 elite soldiers stood guard, and 30,000 subjects lived in stability. The entire city was a picture of thriving prosperity. To outsiders, I was the creator-level protector of this land, the only salvation in this chaotic world. I wielded supreme divine power. commanded a vast territory, and stood at the pinnacle of this region. As usual, I ascended the main tower to inspect the city's defenses. The night had passed without incident. The city orderly and calm, but my vigilance remained undiminished. After learning the truth about the system's shackles, I was no longer fooled by surface-level stability. I felt that beneath this prosperity lurked a turbulent undercurrent ready to erupt at any moment. I just couldn't pinpoint its true source. Seraphina arrived at the tower on time to report. Her posture was upright, her expression obedient, still the image of a loyal aide. She wore a neatly fitted knight's armor and reported the military training and defense status in a steady tone. Her every word and action were flawless. No different from any other day. If my mind hadn't already been tempered and I hadn't sensed the hidden conspiracy, I would have continued to trust this capable subordinate who had followed me for so long. The city is completely stable. No unusual beast activity nearby. That was the only question lingering in my mind at this moment. I had saved her life, granted her power and status, trusted her with responsibilities, and never once wronged her. I had even entrusted her with half the military affairs of the city-state, giving her a rank and honor far beyond ordinary people. I truly could not fathom the root of her betrayal. Seraphina let out a light laugh, filled with bitterness and madness, her eyes burning with boundless hatred. Why? Because the creation system that made you a god is the very force that slaughtered my people and annihilated my ancient lineage's civilization. Every word dripped with blood, revealing the truth of a grudge buried for 10,000 years. The Walker clan she belonged to was a collateral branch of the ancient creation civilization, the only surviving bloodline of that primordial era. Back then, when the main civilization spiraled out of control and collapsed, the surviving ancient descendants tried to destroy the rogue system's core and break the chains of civilization. Instead, they were devoured by the system's own rules. Tens of thousands of their kin were slaughtered, leaving only her, a child, barely saved by her clansmen, forced to live in hiding under a false identity. And that very system, which had butchered her entire clan, crossed the eons to bind itself to me. Every time I rose with the system's power, every time I used its creation abilities to build prosperity, I was stepping on the bones of her people to ascend the throne of godhood. I watched my kin fall one by one, watched my clan's civilization vanish completely. I endured for 10 years, disguised myself as a down-and-out knight, and wandered the entire continent, just waiting for the day the system's host would appear. Seraphina's right hand suddenly gripped the sword at her waist, the blade sliding half an inch from its sheath, its cold gleam sharp as ice. What you thought was a chance rescue was my deliberate approach. What you believed was loyal devotion was my carefully laid revenge. My mind reeled. All the details of the past instantly clicked into place. The chance encounter in the woods, the desperate plea for help, the obedient following, the diligent assistance. None of it was coincidence. It was all a meticulously crafted deception. I prided myself on being meticulous and cautious, fighting against ancient fate and guarding against royal conspiracies. Yet I had let down all my defenses around the person closest to me. You took in 30,000 refugees, built 2,000 elite soldiers, and raised a prosperous city-state. It looked like your rise to the peak, but it was actually your fatal trap. Seraphina pointed down at the city below, her voice cold. I've long since contacted the remnants of the royal nobles and the hidden forces along the borders. Right now, your city is completely surrounded by heavy troops. Half of your new recruits and low-level guards have already been secretly turned by me. The moment she finished speaking, urgent horns, clashing steel, and chaotic shouts erupted from below. The soldiers who had been standing guard in perfect order suddenly split apart. One faction turned their weapons on the unsuspecting guards inside the city. Order collapsed instantly. The bustling market became a battlefield. Civilians fled in panic, and the peaceful era I had built was plunged into internal chaos in an instant. Karen scrambled to lead a counterattack within the city, his shouts cutting through the turmoil. But he couldn't suppress the sudden rebellion. The foundation I had spent years building was crumbling in the hands of the person I trusted most. Serafina walked toward me slowly, sword in hand, her killing intent palpable. You used the system to become a god, enjoying the worship of countless generations, while bearing the blood debt of my entire clan. Today, I will overturn everything you have. Let you taste what it's like to lose your home, your family, and your life's work. I looked down at the city engulfed in flames and panic. Then back at Serafina, whose hatred burned like a wildfire. In my heart, there was no anger, only an overwhelming sense of absurdity and cold clarity. In a chaotic world, conspiracies never come only from external enemies. The deadliest blade is always hidden deep in the human heart. But I felt no panic. Having endured the suppression of ancient shackles, I had long shed my impulsiveness, betrayal, internal strife. Blood feuds, none of it mattered. Today, I would personally end this revenge plot that had festered for years. I slowly raised my hand, and the power of the block rules stirred around me, a sharp gleam flashing in my eyes. You gambled everything on revenge. But you miscalculated. I can build prosperity, and I can quell war. I can reach the peak, and I can crush betrayal. On the high tower, the cold wind howled, carrying the chaotic sounds of battle from below. Serafina charged at me, her knight's longsword gleaming with 10 years of pent-up hatred. Her strikes were fierce and cunning, each aimed at my vital points. Her swordsmanship had always been unmatched along the border, and now, abandoning all restraint, she fought with suicidal ferocity. Her combat power surged several times beyond normal, making her one of the top knight-level fighters on the continent. But she was facing Masamion, who had already unlocked the full set of divine gear and mastered the block creation rules. I stood firm, neither dodging nor retreating, with a mere thought. Several hard diamond blocks materialized in the air, stacking into a dense defensive layer in front of me. A harsh, piercing clang of metal rang out as the sword struck the diamond blocks, sending sparks flying but leaving not even a shallow scratch. Serafina's pupils shrank. For the first time, shock and despair flickered across her face. She had planned for 10 years, turned half the garrison, allied with royal forces, and laid an inescapable net. She thought she had grasped all my weaknesses, only to realize that my true combat potential had never been fully revealed. My earlier restraint and caution, which she had mistaken for weakness, were actually my accumulation and patience in resisting the system's shackles. Impossible. You were supposed to be bound by the shackles. Your power limited. How can you still be this strong? She hissed, her confidence crumbling completely. The shackles trap those who drown in power, not those who control themselves, I said calmly, raising my hand to summon countless sharp mithril blocks into the air, like 1,000 floating blades, all aimed at her vital points. You carry a blood feud, and revenge is not a crime, but dragging tens of thousands of innocent people into chaos, trying to overturn the world, that is unforgivable. With that, I flicked my finger. The countless mithril blades shot forward instantly, shattering her sword techniques and locking down her movements layer by layer. In an instant, Serafina's sword was knocked from her hand, and her arms were pinned tight by block barriers, leaving her completely immobilized. The revenge strike she had spent 10 years planning was utterly crushed before my absolute creation power, with the core threat on the tower neutralized. I looked down at the entire city. Internal strife raged on. The rebels and the royal coalition attacked from both inside and out. Smoke filled the air. Civilians fled in terror, and the once prosperous city was now a scene of devastation. Karen and his loyal elites fought desperately, already wounded and retreating step by step. The rebel forces numbered as many as 8,000. If this dragged on, the entire city would be destroyed. I stopped holding back. I fully unlocked all the system's permissions. The long dormant system screen blazed to life, all sealed ultimate abilities unlocking one after another, with a continuous stream of prompts. Ultimate permission unlocked. Full area block reconstruction, control of world rules, omniscience of civilization shackles. Host has completely broken free from ability constraints, becoming the sole creation dominator of this world. A torrent of rule power swept across the entire world, covering the city and the surrounding 100 miles. With a thought, the collapsed walls were instantly rebuilt, the broken streets quickly repaired, and the scattered building blocks automatically returned to their places. At the same time, countless hard obsidian blocks rose from the ground, instantly forming a 1,000-mile blockade, trapping all the rebels and royal coalition forces inside, cutting off every escape route. Under the absolute suppression of rule power, the weapons of the rebels inside the city and the royal soldiers outside shattered, their combat abilities completely sealed. Everyone froze in place, their faces filled with despair, unable to stir up any more trouble. In less than a quarter of an hour, the internal chaos that had ravaged the city was completely quelled. All rebel forces were subdued, and the royal nobles who had conspired in the rebellion were captured. The border threat that had festered for years and the revenge plot that had simmered for a decade were wiped out by my hand. After this battle, My name spread across the entire continent. No one dared to oppose me. Over the next 6 months, I led my army steadily outward, crushing the remnants of the royal forces, clearing out the beast lairs across the continent, and pacifying all the fragmented warlords. No force could withstand my creation power. The flames of war across the entire continent were extinguished, and the era of chaos came to an end. With absolute strength, I unified the entire continent. My subjects numbered over 1 million. My territory covered the entire otherworldly continent, and I established an unprecedented unified era of prosperity. I became the sole ruler of this world, truly capable of shaping destiny with a raised hand and calming the people with a lowered one. There was no more war, no more oppression, no more rampaging beasts. The people lived in peace, and everyone revered me as the true God of creation. But standing at the pinnacle of the world, gazing at the vast, beautiful landscape, I felt no joy in reaching the summit, only an endless emptiness and cold. The moment I unlocked all the system's permissions, the truth of the ultimate cost was fully revealed. The so-called civilization shackles were never about gradual assimilation, they were an eternal binding. The moment I unified the world and took control of all creation rules, I completely replaced the ancient creation civilization. Becoming the new vessel of the world's rules, I gained infinite lifespan, invincible power, and the divine authority to control all things. But I forever lost my qualification to be human. I would stand eternally alone at the peak of the world, watching generation after generation of mortals live, age, fall ill, and die, watching dynasties rise and fall, watching the passage of time, with no one by my side, no one to share my feelings. I would never again experience joy, anger, sorrow, or happiness. All emotions, attachments, and humanity would gradually fade away as the divine power fully bound itself to me. I had won the war, won against the conspiracy, won against fate, and unified the world, but I had lost myself. Once I had crossed into another world, only to escape mediocrity and carve out a foothold to survive. Later, I rose step by step, only to break free from shackles and seize control of my fate. But in the end, I realized that so-called godhood was never a gift, it was the cruelest imprisonment. I was not a chosen savior, but a relic left behind by an ancient civilization, a tool to reboot the world's order. The evening breeze swept across the empty Divine King's platform, where the vast mountains and rivers lay spread before my eyes. An unparalleled prosperity and splendor under heaven, yet I alone possessed nothing. Wait, don't click away. There's an extra chapter. I am Seraphina, and this is my story. I have seen the coldest face of a god. It was not the tyranny of thunderbolts descending to burn all life, nor the arrogance of looking down from on high, indifferent to the masses. It was the obliviousness of one who, wielding supreme creative power, personally forged the lights of 10,000 homes, redeemed the suffering of countless people, and ended the chaos of war, all without realizing that beneath his divine throne lay piled the bones of millions and the blood and tears of eons. Elias Thorne would never truly understand that the MC creation system he had awakened from nothing after crossing into an ordinary world at invincible power he relied on to defy fate, ascend the divine throne, and rule the entire continent was never a gift of fortune from the heavens. It was a cursed vessel, bought with the annihilation of souls and the extinction of an entire civilization. The price paid by the 100,000 members of the ancient Walker clan. Every block he created, every rule he activated, every burst of divine power he unleashed, each was a reenactment of the apocalyptic punishment that had once destroyed my people. 10 years had passed. The world's mountains and rivers had changed. Countless people and events had faded with the wind. Yet the day of my clan's destruction remained seared into the depths of my soul, undiminished, haunting my dreams every night. 10 years ago, I was not yet the destitute, rootless fallen female knight of the Roland Kingdom, adrift at the bottom of society. I was the carefree little descendant of the only surviving lineage of an ancient creation civilization, protected in the palms of my people. Our Walker clan dwelled in an ancient hidden realm, a crack in the continent, a sanctuary sheltered by the world's rules, surrounded by mountains, with clear springs murmuring, ancient trees towering, and a constant, temperate climate. It was utterly cut off from the endless royal conflicts and monstrous rampages of the outside world. For generations, we took no part in secular power struggles, never set foot in the smoke of war, and quietly guarded the remnants of ancient civilization, its texts, runes, and fragments of rules, holding on to a peaceful, secluded corner of the world. The elders of the clan passed down an ancient teaching. We were the last bloodline of the creation civilization, the watchers of the world's rules. As long as the clan survived, the spark of civilization would never be extinguished, and one day, the opportunity for its revival would come. I was young then, naive and innocent, believing this peace would last forever, that the company of my people and the tranquility of the years were the entirety of my fate. I studied, practiced basic bloodline secret arts, and followed my father to observe ancient runes, thinking the rest of my life would be like this, plain and stable. But the true rules of the world never favor the remnants left behind. So-called civilization watching was nothing more than a feudal wait destined for a final reckoning. That annihilation came without warning. There was no prelude of mountains crumbling or earth splitting, no roar of beasts besieging a city, no smoke of foreign invasion, only the sudden dimming of the entire sky. The once clear and warm sky of the hidden realm instantly turned into a dead, white expanse. Stars and moon vanished. Twilight hues faded, and fine, black, flocculent matter drifted down slowly, the debris of the ancient main civilization's complete collapse. The ashes of eons of accumulated civilization, the barrier that had protected the clan for 1,000 years, silently shattered inch by inch. Its flowing light dissipating into nothingness. Standing by the altar at the heart of the clan's land, I watched as the people around me, one by one, became transparent. Whether they were white-haired elders, vigorous youths, or innocent children, without exception, their flesh, bones, blood, and souls were dismantled into fine specks of light, devoured and dissolved by an invisible, grand force of rules, leaving not even a trace behind. It was not slaughter. It was a more desperate erasure. It was the ultimate purge initiated by the system's origin to completely wipe clean the traces of the old civilization, to pave the way for a new host, silent, painless, yet utterly cruel. It erased a branch of civilization that had endured for 10,000 years from the face of the world. My father was the last boundary-guarding elder of the Walker clan, and the most powerful holder of secret arts among our people, in the desperate situation of total annihilation. He burned his entire cultivation and bloodline, exhausting the last reserves the clan had accumulated over millennia, and forcibly tore open a tiny, fleeting escape rift within the solidified cage of rules. I still remember his final appearance, robes stained with blood, hair turned completely white, his body swaying. There was no fear of impending death in his eyes, only a bone-deep sorrow and a heavy, resolute determination. He pushed me, 12 years old, into the rift with all his strength. The warmth of his palm was searing yet brief, and his words, heavy and indelible, branded themselves into my soul for the next 10 years. Rafi, live. As long as the system exists, the hatred will not cease. When the foreign host arrives and the creative power is reborn, that will be your time for revenge, and the only chance to end this 10th-year cycle. In the last second before the rift closed, I saw his figure dissolve into countless specks of light, merging into the gray-white sky, vanishing completely. That day, 100,000 of my people were annihilated. The 1,000-year hidden realm was reduced to scorched earth. The ancient Walker civilization, passed down for 10,000 years, was utterly severed, the vast legacy of a civilization, having weathered eons of time and countless disasters, ultimately left only mean insignificant ember. From that day on, there was no more ancient Walker tribe in the world. No more watchers of civilization, only a lone orphan, Seraphina Walker, burdened with the blood-deep hatred of her entire clan, trapped in the cage of fate. After escaping the hidden realm, I fell into the most desolate border forests of a chaotic world. Those days were the darkest of my life. I was helpless, hungry and cold, bearing severe wounds from my torn bloodline, and crushed by the agony of my clan's extinction. I dared not reveal my identity, dared not use even a trace of the clan's secret arts, for fear that the lingering aura of civilization would trigger a second purge by the rules. I could only hide in dark tree hollows and rock caves, surviving on wild fruits and mountain springs, slowly healing my injuries, slowly washing away all the bloodline marks from my body, erasing every trace of my connection to the ancient civilization. I buried my own past with my own hands, abandoned the glory of my bloodline, and from then on, I was just a nameless speck of dust in a chaotic world, living only for revenge. Once my injuries healed, I deliberately suppressed my innate, extraordinary talents, disguised myself as an ordinary orphan with mediocre aptitude and a tragic background, and entered the public Knight Academy of the Roland Kingdom. I knew that to get close to the future system host, to have the capital for revenge, I had to step into the center of secular power, learn the ways of intrigue and killing, and understand all the rules and veins of this continent. Life at the Knight Academy was monotonous, cruel, and cold, perfectly mirroring the brutal law of the jungle in this chaotic world. Students from noble families bullied those of common birth, relying on their family backgrounds. Bullying, ostracism, and scheming were everywhere. The honest and gentle only ended up as sacrifices at the bottom. I never competed for glory, never showed my edge. Faced with bullying and provocation, I endured and retreated, pretending to be timid, cowardly, and dull-witted, allowing others to despise, mock, and exclude me. Everyone thought I was a weak, useless, and hopeless ordinary girl. No one knew that beneath this humble, enduring exterior lay an obsession to overturn heaven and earth, and an undying hatred that spanned 10,000 years. By day, I silently bore all the injustice and humiliation. In the dead of night, alone, I honed my swordsmanship, tempered my mind, and strategized, turning all my pain and resentment into the driving force to grow stronger. 7 years of grinding in the academy, from the lowest apprentice, I endured and relied on my strength. Step by step, to reach the position of a high-ranking knight. I shed my youthful naivety, forged a steady temperament and exquisite swordsmanship, and saw through the corruption and darkness of the Roland Kingdom's upper echelons. The greed and selfishness of the powerful. I mapped out the power distribution of the entire continent, the territories of magical beasts, and the hidden strongholds. After graduation, I deliberately moved among the royal nobles and powerful figures, feigning obedience and engaging in hollow pleasantries, while secretly befriending disenfranchised nobles, gathering border intelligence, and rallying scattered forces. Slowly building my own covert network. I did not seek temporary glory or secular power. I only aimed to lay enough groundwork, waiting quietly for that fated foreigner who would descend with the power of creation. This wait lasted a full 10 years. 10 years is enough time for black hair to turn white, for mountains and rivers to change, for a mortal to live out a lifetime. I watched coldly as the world played out its myriad scenes. Saw countless strong men rise and fall, witnessed the royal family's endless power struggles and the people's displacement. Saw magical beasts run rampant and life in the chaotic world suffer. My heart had long been as hard as stone, unmoved by suffering, unswayed by warmth, undistracted by prosperity. In my eyes, this seemingly vibrant world was itself born from the system's rules that had butchered my people. The stability the people enjoyed, the prosperity they chased, the power the strong fought for, all of it was the blood and tears of my 100,000 clansmen as a funeral offering. A false peace bought by the destruction of an ancient civilization, not worthy of a shred of my pity. In my heart, from beginning to end, there was only one thing: to wait for the host, to complete my revenge, to end the cycle, until a shocking anomaly erupted in the border forests, shattering my 10 years of silent waiting. In the desolate, untrodden wilderness, a sturdy, orderly stone wood fortress rose from nothing overnight. The beast tides that had raged for years were wiped out without a single loss. Countless refugees were inexplicably sheltered, and a patch of pure land was born in the desperate chaos. These miracles, defying the established rules of this world, precisely matched the prophecies passed down by my ancestors. I knew he had come, the stranger from a foreign land, bearing the ancient creation system, and the blood debt of my entire clan had finally arrived. My destiny, my hatred, the end point of my 10 years of endurance, had arrived as scheduled. I meticulously orchestrated that perfect ambush in the forest. I deliberately ventured deep into the monster dense area, shed most of my combat power, suppressed all killing intent and sharpness, and allowed several blade-fang wolves to severely wound me. Pushing myself to the brink of death, I understood these strangers from peaceful worlds too well, pure-hearted, kind, with strong empathy, unable to watch the innocent die, and most likely to take pity on and help the weak in desperate situations. Everything unfolded exactly as I had calculated, down to the smallest detail. Elias appeared just in time, annihilating all the beasts with a wave of his hand, saving me. Battered and seemingly destitute, his eyes were clear and honest, free of suspicion or scheming, gentle and pure. Unlike anyone in this chaotic world, he accepted my allegiance without any guard, easily granting me his most precious trust and the privilege of proximity. The initial days and nights together were the most agonizing and contradictory of my 10 years of endurance. He was utterly different from the cold-blooded, indifferent system puppet host I had imagined. He never used his invincible divine power to kill wantonly, never bullied the weak, and never coveted power, women, or wealth. He would take and displace refugees and build homes for the homeless. He would expend divine power without hesitation to repel beast tides time and again, protecting the peace of the land. He would restore order, distribute resources fairly, end oppression, and give those in despair a new lease on life. He was honest with others, trusted his subordinates, and treated everyone who followed him sincerely. In this rotten, chaotic, and murderous world, he was the only light, clean, upright, gentle, and powerful. Countless silent nights, I stood alone on the city wall, looking down at the peaceful scene of thousands of lights and people living in contentment. The hatred in my heart would waver and shake time and again. More than once, I fell into extreme struggle and confusion, even harboring misplaced sympathy and hesitation. Elias himself was innocent. He was just an ordinary person who had accidentally transmigrated and been forcibly bound to a system. He knew nothing of the ancient secrets, the ancient blood feuds, or that the divine power in his hands was stained with the blood and tears of 100,000 wronged souls. He did good, pacified the people, saved the world, and single-handedly ended the chaos, saving tens of thousands of lives. Should someone like him really be destroyed by me at all costs? I asked myself countless times. What was the true meaning of revenge? Was it to slaughter the innocent, or to end the sin? But every time kindness sprouted in my heart, and my obsession wavered. The nightmare of the clan's annihilation would arrive on schedule. The gray sky, the scattering clansmen, my father's resolute gaze, the scorched earth of our 1,000-year-old homeland. Each scene was bone-chillingly cold, instantly shattering all my hesitation. He was innocent, but the system in his hands was guilty. The divine power he used to save the people was the weapon that slaughtered my entire clan. The prosperous era he created was built on the ruins of my civilization's destruction. The kinder, greater, and more protective he was, the more revered he became, the more ironic and heavy this ancient karmic debt became. He enjoyed everything bought with my people's sacrifice, becoming a god praised by the world. Yet he could never repay the blood debt of 100,000 souls, nor revive the fallen ancient civilization. Grievances have their master. Hatred has its root. Since the system could not be destroyed, I would take revenge on its host. Even if he was innocent, even if he saved the world, even if no one in the world understood. I had to walk this path of revenge to the end. This was my only remaining destiny, the entire meaning of my 10 years of survival. From then on, I completely suppressed all softness and hesitation, continuing to disguise myself as a docile, humble, and loyal follower. I wholeheartedly helped him train troops, govern the army, organize the city-state, manage state affairs, and consolidate power. I helped him gather refugees, quell hidden dangers, and expand his territory, with my own hands. I guided him step by step from a lone transmigrator to a top-tier powerhouse ruling over tens of thousands of people, personally creating the most prosperous city-state in this chaotic world. I wanted him to reach the peak more than anyone else. And I helped him grow stronger more diligently than anyone else, because I didn't want to defeat a weak version of him. I wanted to personally destroy everything he had painstakingly built. I wanted to wait until his foundation was solid. The people's hearts were with him. His achievements were renowned, and he commanded the reverence of all, and then suddenly turn against him, dragging him down from his divine pedestal, making him personally experience the ultimate despair of a clan's sudden annihilation. The loss of everything. I wanted this living God to understand that his proud creation divine right was never a heavenly glory, but a bloody curse that had trapped ancient civilizations and everyone in it. I secretly laid my plans for years, quietly contacting fallen nobles and hidden forces on the border, inciting wavering garrison troops within the city, setting up an inescapable net. I gambled my 10 years of youth, half a lifetime of endurance, all my schemes, and even the stability of the entire border and the peace of tens of thousands of innocent people, all for the sake of that ultimate revenge. In the end, I got my wish. At his most glorious and dazzling moment, I crossed swords with him, sparking a civil war that toppled his foundation. But in the end, I still lost. I lost completely and utterly. I won the gamble on people's hearts, on power plays, on the situation, on human greed and cowardice, but I could not win against the absolute gap in divine power. Before the creation rules he had fully unlocked and controlled, my 10 years of obsession, half a lifetime of scheming, and my lifelong revenge were nothing but a ridiculous, absurd farce. The moment I was trapped within the diamond block barrier, I stood quietly on the high platform, looking at Elias, his figure solitary and cold as he overlooked the world. I suddenly understood the absurdity and cruelty of fate. He had won all the conflicts and wars of the world, crushed all conspiracies and rebellions, unified a vast territory, and become a supreme divine lord, only to be eternally imprisoned by the system's divine right, losing his freedom, his self, and the joys and sorrows of a mortal. The rest of his life would be nothing but endless loneliness and desolation, forever unable to find release. And I had lost my lifelong obsession with revenge. I failed to avenge my clan, failed to end the ancient cycle, but unexpectedly broke free from the shackles of fate, released from the bloody obsession that had bound me for 10 years. No longer tormented day and night by hatred, we were both prisoners of the system, both sacrifices to the fall of an ancient civilization. He was a god imprisoned by divine right, and I was the embers bound by hatred. We had no original grievance, yet we were burdened by an ancient blood debt, playing games and tormenting each other, ultimately ending in mutual defeat and solitary loneliness. Now, the land is peaceful. The prosperous age continues. The people live and work in contentment. And year after year they sing the praises of the God's grace. Everyone in the world lives in light and stability. Only he and I remain forever trapped in that ancient feud, with no one to redeem us, no one to empathize with us, no one to know our respective pain and desolation. The wind blew across the high platform, brushing through my hair, and carried away my last trace of obsession. The sea of blood and deep hatred had become the past. The 10th Ascendier cycle had ended. I survived in this world. But I was homeless, with no hatred to hold on to, no wish to seek. A prosperous world, 1,000 lights, a vast landscape, peaceful year after year. Only I am the most superfluous ember, a solitary ghost in the rise of a god and the fall of a civilization.